Wondered how it is that some churches in the U.S. seem to get inordinately wealthy, and not only churches, but pastors themselves. Have you ever wondered if maybe the laws granting religions tax exemptions should be changed in this regard? Have you ever thought you could go to jail for trying to get to the bottom of these questions? Well, that's exactly what happened to one of our guests. Join us tonight for what promises to be a fascinating discussion here on Mormonism Live.
All right.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening to you too, Mr. Reel.
Good evening, Mr. Radio Free Mormon. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm really excited about tonight's show. We have not one guest, but two guests tonight, and I'm going to be introducing them here in just a second. They're both in the green room waiting to come on. But first, do you have an announcement for us?
Yeah, I just wanted to show folks something really quick. This Saturday, you probably have already heard this. This is a project I've been working on for some time. This took about 100 hours to put together. I don't know if it'll be great, but I think it's at least going to be good. And I'm really excited about the topic. It will be a 1-hour examination of religion generally, which I think actually goes nicely with the topic tonight. Religion generally, and will essentially give the viewer the ability to see their own religion in the context of all kinds of other religions, and to sort of sense what it is that these religions worldwide do in order to get you to gravitate towards belief, even if the claims of that religion are absurd. And so during the show tonight, I'll let you get started with the guest and the topic, but during the show tonight in the live chat, in the comments, and then also down below, if you're watching this after the live, it'll be in the comments there, and I'll put it up on the screen as well. But we'd love, folks, if you wanted to join us Saturday, 2 p.m. Mountain Time, for this 1-hour video. What if it's true? I'll be there. I'll be commenting along with you, and hope to see many of you there. So there it is.
I will be there too in the live chat.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks for that announcement. So we've got two people on. We're going to be talking about churches. We're going to be talking about money, and we're going to be talking about churches and money. And we've got a couple of people who are well versed in that. The first one is a filmmaker. His name is Nathan Apffel. The other individual is Randy Bell, well known to this audience, I think. Nathan Apffel may need a little bit more of an introduction, so we've allotted a little extra time for that. Here's a nice profile shot of Nathan. I got this from the internet. At 16 years of age, Nathan Apffel was life-flighted back to the United States due to a near-death accident on the wind-blown sands of the Mexican coast. This experience significantly altered his young perspective on life. Today, as a writer and director with numerous filmmaking credits under his belt, Nathan has yet to slow down. Best Original Score and a Best Film nomination at X-Dance, 2 Emmy wins for the TV show Fins, produced by Ira Hopper, and multiple global edit and cinematography awards are just the tipping point. His content has been seen globally by over 150 million people on Fox, Fuel TV, Netflix, Hulu, and countless web and local TV outlets. Please welcome to the show, Nathan Apffel. There he is.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. I think that was an old article. I think you've done a lot of stuff since then, in other words.
That was probably 15 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it looks beautiful where you are. Without giving away your exact location, are you up in the woods somewhere in the mountains?
Yeah, I live kind of deep in the mountains. You got a snowmobile or quad ride to get to my house in the winter. So it's fun. It gives me time to think and saturate on this topic.
Yeah. Well, it looks very rugged. Before we go any further, though, let me introduce our second guest tonight, Randy Bell. I'm sorry, it says born in 1959. I left it in there. I'm sorry, Randy. That's a year before I was born. He's a socio-economist, real estate economist, and appraiser, expert witness, and author based in Los Angeles, California. known for dealing with stigmatized property. Bell is an expert on real estate damages who authored a highly referenced textbook on the subject and was called Dr. Disaster by the Wall Street Journal. Bell has also made a name in the field of Mormon studies, especially for his research on the Joseph Smith connection with Dartmouth University in the 1820s. I added that last line in there. That was not on the internet, but it's equally true with everything else. So let's bring on, if we can, Randy Bell. How are you doing?
Hey, it's great to be amongst rock stars. Good to be here.
My goodness. Hey, it's so wonderful to have you here. Now, the reason that Nathan is here, and we're going to have you talk about this after you talk a little bit about your past and then what you've been doing in the last 10 or 12 years, and then talking about Mormonism specifically, because as you know, our audience is primarily interested in the Mormon aspect when it comes to finances and churches, although I think there's a general interest in how bad other churches, other than just Mormonism, can abuse their position and the laws that are slanted in favor of religious organizations. So having said that, you've got, Nathan, a docu-series, that's a docu-series, correct?
Yeah, docu-series.
That's the correct term. 7-part?
Yep, 7 parts, 7 hours. It'll come in just over 7 hours. So it's a lot of material.
And it's called The Religion Business. Is that right?
It's called The Religion Business. And then the tagline is, in the nonprofit Goliath, because we look at the nonprofit sector as a whole. You got to start with the nonprofit sector as a whole and then drill down into the religious exemptions to understand the legal architecture of the system.
It says this is going to be out Easter?
Yeah,
this year?
This year. Yeah, we're in the final stage. The whole series is cut. We have an app as well that's rolling out simultaneously, and we hope it's the first tool of its kind to really drive accountability through the system. And it's just a free app for churches and congregants to use, and then secular nonprofits and donors as well. But yep, everything drops April 20th, so it's going to be exciting.
Do you know what platform?
I produce for Amazon, so we can go with Amazon. We have one benchmark that we've told all the distributors, which is we need 200 million views globally on the show in the first 6 months, because what that'll do is it'll almost force a conversation at the federal level. And that is our whole goal, is to start the conversation in Congress to look at this. And so 200 million views. So there's 4 different global distributors that are interested. And so it's, hey, who can get us to 200 million views in 6 months? That's what we care about. And so we'll end up partnering with whoever can get us there.
But still, it should be coming out in about a month's time. Is that right?
It's coming up quick. Yeah. It's exciting. There's a lot of things happening right now.
Can you give us the thumbnail? We'll get more in detail later after we go back and talk about your past and what got you here. But can you give us the thumbnail of what this docuseries, The Religion Business, is about?
Yeah, we're basically just looking at the legal architecture in the U.S. that underpins religious exemptions. So we're not here to point fingers at different denominations. I don't really care about that. What we're after is, how do all of these institutions play by the same rules, and what are the loopholes in those rules that create most of the abuse? And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is one of the big players in one of those loopholes, and we profile 10 loopholes in the code.
Thank you for noticing. We tried.
Yeah. So
because you're not a Mormon, are you? You've never been a Mormon, right?
I have never been a Mormon. My mom was raised LDS, but I'll say half of my extended family's LDS, but I was not raised LDS. You
know how I can tell you've never been a Mormon? There's a light coming from your face.
Oh, I was going to say the tequila in my cabinet. I don't know. But yeah.
All right. So now let's turn to Randy Bell. Dr. Bell, you have just finished reviewing a manuscript of your forthcoming book, The Monetizing. It's not this is The Religion Business. That's the docuseries, but yours is Monetizing Jesus is the working title.
Yeah, I don't have the high slick graphics done yet, but the manuscript, I just finished it last weekend. I've been working on it for 5-6 years, I guess. And so I got the first pass on the manuscript. So the book will be out this year. I take a different angle, which we may get into with comparing and contrasting with Nathan's work. But no, I'm very much into this topic.
Okay. Can you give us a synopsis where it's different or what your manuscript hits that's a different angle on this?
Sure. My angle is to first start with the predator and prey. I call it the predator systems theory. It's how predators set up and take advantage of their prey, their membership, and they use bait. Just like you go out fishing or hunting, you use bait. And I think one of the best baits out there is Jesus, because Jesus, I have a lot of atheist friends that follow Jesus in terms of teachings, and Jesus makes great bait and generates a lot of money. So we start looking at the predator-prey dynamic, and then we get into kind of empowering people through learning more about logical fallacies, cognitive bias, epistemology, and research methods. I never really express any of my personal opinions in the book. It's more laying out a world, laying out how people can kind of get their own worldview, doing their own research is what my thing's all about.
Okay, very good. Nathan, by the way, not to put too fine a point on it, but you're a Christian, right?
I consider myself a Christ follower. Yeah.
Okay. Is that different than a Christian?
I just don't like the term. There's so much.
Is it getting a bad name?
Yeah, 100%. I think it is.
Giving the name Christian a bad
No,
name?
no, I would say Christians are giving themselves a bad name. But I just like the term Christ follower. Like to Randy's point, I know a lot of atheists as well that love Christ, and they say Christ was this man in history who radically transformed humanity. And so I'm a Christ follower. I like his teachings. I like his principles, and I'll leave it at that.
I just want to make sure you know that Randy's a Christian too, or a Christ follower.
Whatever I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Jesus. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a good dude.
All right. So I'm just promoting relationships all over the place. That's what I do here. So let's go to earlier in your life, Nathan. And I wanted to bring up the fact that you are a Christian because that plays heavily in how it is that you got to where you are now. Can you tell us about your formative years growing up?
Yeah, I was raised in a non-denominational megachurch in Los Angeles. So it was probably 5,000 people.
And we talked about this. I can't remember. It wasn't the Crystal Cathedral, though, was it?
No. It was in Glendale, so a little further north. But yeah, I was raised in the megachurch. I was tucked into choir, when I was a young kid. I sang in choir till I was 13. I went to every summer camp in Awanas and all the programs they have within the institution. My dad was the flying angel in the Christmas pageant. I was really in it. And I would volunteer as a high schooler in the junior high ministry. And it was really my accident when I was 16. I almost died with that traumatic brain injury that just radically started reshaping my life. And it wasn't like a faith journey. It was, I just began to travel. I picked up a camera because I couldn't do anything else. I was a big action sports guy, and I started working for Oakley, the sunglass company, when I was 17. And flash forward 5 years, they had taken me all over the world, from Tahiti and Norway to Australia, and everywhere I'd go, I just like to visit, Christian churches and seminaries. And I wound up in the poorest churches in the favelas in Brazil, to underground churches in Asia, and I would come back and I couldn't reconcile the mega church in America. And so in my early 20s, I just started asking questions, and that opened up the rabbit hole. And as soon as you stick your head into it, it just sucks you in.
Nathan, you may be taking it for granted that I know what you mean, but I would like you to be a little more specific. What is it about the comparison between these smaller churches, these less well-off churches in foreign countries that you saw, and the comparison with mega churches in the U.S. that caused you some kind of angst? There was a disquiet there.
They, number one, they weren't money focused. These impoverished churches, they were community driven. They had no flash. A lot of them were dirt floors and tin roofs. And I firmly believe I felt God there. Like, these people were just in community, or whatever you want to call it. But I'm like, oh, there's something here. You feel it. And they were, when you said the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread, these people were utterly reliant on that daily bread. I would meet Hondurans and sit with Hondurans that would make $300 a year, one family, $300, $312, and they had 11 children. And I mean, like, they lived daily. And so they had to put, and this is a big part of the show, they have to put their faith in their God for that, what's coming next tomorrow. And then I think that's what I was mapping over the current church here in America. Cause I'd say, you guys don't care about tomorrow. Your coffers are full, most of you, especially the big boys. And it's how much money can we extract to build the institution bigger? Let me rephrase that. We need to build the institution bigger, and we need money because of it. And so one fun little button that I like to put on the show is, and we show you this in the show, we track you through history. Every time the church needed money throughout history, it was because they were building something or waging a war. So they would go to the scriptures and find verses that justified their need for your money. But there's never been a consistent thread of giving in the Christian history. And so that's such a unique characteristic to look at as you map it over whatever church you go to, whether that be the LDS Church or a small little Baptist church that's struggling, or a mega church. They will justify their demand for giving based on the cost centers they have, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. But was there an experience that happened with a member of the church that you belong to in Texas and some adopted children?
Yeah, that church was in San Diego, actually. So I ping ponged around with my family a lot, and we ended up at a large mega church in San Diego. And my junior high pastor became the high school pastor, and he was groomed to take over this large mega church. And he was very charismatic, very loud, very goofy. And he was a mentor of mine all through my youth. And he was, like I said, being prepped and groomed to take over this mega church. And I was on the road, and I got a call, and it's like, did you hear about this guy? And I'm like, no, what happened? And I think he had 5 adopted children, and he ended up raping them, and he ended up in jail. He's still in jail to this day. And that's what really tripped me up, is I was like, how can there be so little accountability in the system that this guy could be doing this for years, if not a decade, and get away with it as we're grooming him to take over this massive business. And so that was one big turning point for me, where I was like, okay, time out. I have to look at the infrastructure of this. And, Jesus says you got to build your house on the rock, not on sand. And I'll start with this. Every religious institution, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christian, Islam, Judaism in America, is built on sand. And so, it's not hard to knock the house over.
Well, we know that that's true because that verse is in the Book of Mormon too.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Can I jump in with a question for you, Nathan?
Yeah.
I know we talked about this before, but share with the audience, if your church, you're not being in the Mormon church, in the Mormon church, we treat a lot of this child abuse as moral failures, not as crimes. And it's an area that gets me really riled up. I want to flip cars and furniture. It gets me so mad. But how did your church handle it?
They tried to sweep it under as a moral failure as well. They even came out and said, we need to forgive. And I was like, nah, we don't forgive that. Like that is a criminal act. And luckily he did end up in jail. But, you look at Robert Morris. I don't know if you guys know what's going on in Texas with Robert Morris, but he was just indicted on 5 charges of child sexual abuse. And he was a massive megachurch pastor in Texas. And luckily the attorney general of Oklahoma, where the crime happened decades ago, had the balls to slam that hammer down. And it's really rattling the non-denominational space, because people are starting to say this is not a moral failure. It is a moral failure, yes, but it is a criminal failure.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I want to get you, Nathan, on the cusp of when it is, because backing up, I understand you spent 12 years researching, filming for this docuseries that's going to be coming out in about a month.
Yeah.
And I want to get you on the cusp of that, because I think maybe we're missing something yet. Maybe I'm missing something. I've heard these really important events happening. What is it that gets you to the point where you are so passionate about this project that you're going to end up spending over a decade of your life immersed in it?
Yeah. When I was in my late 20s, I was I traveled. I've had a great life. Like I've made TV shows all over the world. I was a very selfish individual. Like I did what I wanted. And in my late 20s, my brother-in-law was a full-time paid pastor, and he was the only guy that would listen to me on this topic, ironically. So a paid pastor was the one person that would listen. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to spend my own money and we're going to go shoot this show. So when I was 28, 12 years ago, we went out and we shot the whole show. I showed up at Joel Osteen's church and got kicked out of that in Texas. I went to Atlanta. Like we spent about 6 months on the road. We came back and I started it in edit, and I just didn't like where it was going. It was very kind of angry and finger pointy, and there was no strategy with it. I always say it was like me standing up against a wall and just screaming at the wall. There was nothing going on. And so I shelved it. I went back to work in the commercial space and the film space, and I never stopped researching and having the conversations. And then when I was 32, I got a girl pregnant that I had just met. And this little bundle of joy popped out 9 months later. I did not want children. I did not want to be married. And as soon as I saw her, I just fell madly in love with my daughter. And for the first time, I felt like I knew what real love was. And so I was watching her grow up, and I'm like, I want her to have some of the experiences I had in the institutional church, because I made friends there. There was a lot of fond memories. Like I kissed my first girl at church. I'm like, there's a lot of fond memories that I just have. And so I said, okay, I'm going to pick up this show again, but I'm going to take it from a different lens. And it's going to be a lens of love. Like I want to take the love I have for my daughter and try to apply it to that same love to my faith, or my crisis of faith, we'll call it. And so 32, so 9 years ago, that's when I really started driving down this idea of, how do we find the problems, expose the problems, educate on the problems, but then how can we solve the problems to try to right this institutional ship, so to speak? And so that's when the project really came to life. Is my whole ethos for it shifted from frustration and anger to, I love this thing, let's try to clean it up.
Okay, great. Hey, Randy, I want to ask you the same question. Now, about the same time, 12 years ago that Nathan is starting this project, you were a happy member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So could you tell our audience how it was you went from that to the person you are now, who has enough interest and enthusiasm for a subject to write a book called Monetizing Jesus to do that?
Well, in a nutshell, I was at home in California, and I was on in fact, I was on the laptop I'm on right now, and I was at the kitchen island, and I was Googling what's new in the church kind of thing in the LDS Church. And I came across this thing I'd never heard of called the Gospel Topic Essays and Polygamy and Nauvoo. And I got to back up a little bit. I went on a mission to England, and polygamy still there, at least when I was there on my mission, was a very hot topic. And we told everybody, because we were told ourselves by our leaders, that Joseph Smith never practiced polygamy. And that was what was the clear message. So I'm reading this thing about Joseph Smith practicing polygamy. I'm looking at the URL. It's from the LDS Church. And I thought this has got to be a scam or something. The church's website's been hijacked. So I unplugged my laptop. I waited the 15 seconds. I waited another 15 seconds. I logged back on. I went straight to the church website, Googled in the Gospel Topic Essays Nauvoo, and it came up. And I said, I'm out. I left the Mormon Church over ethics. LDS standards, my ass. I'm not Mother Teresa. I think everybody knows that knows me, but I'm just the wrong guy to lie to. And when I found out that what I had been told and what I had taught on my mission was a lie, I was done in a second.
And then from that point to wanting to be interested in monetizing Jesus, why is that of interest to you?
Yeah, RFM. I mean, the thing is that, excuse me, when you have that experience, and a lot of people listening, and I know you guys have to some degree or another, when your whole worldview blows up, there's a lot of processing to do. And I really kind of looked at, in the rearview mirror at the last 50 years saying, why did I get roped into this? The signs and the red flags were so obvious. I wiped the slate clean in terms of my biases. I went and bought all the books on atheism off Amazon. I got flights to Egypt and Israel and India to look at major world religions. I have a library at home that's just rows and rows and rows of books. And I just devoured everything with the effort to kind of wipe the slate clean and look at everything objectively. And that's how I kind of came to develop my philosophy. And that was, I was prey. The church was a predator. They lied to me. They manipulated me. They used Jesus as the bait. And then I kind of came up with this predator to prey model. And then I compared it to, I work on these cases. I worked on Jeffrey Epstein. I worked on Heaven's Gate. I worked on a number of predator crime cases. So I knew a lot of the dynamics, and I have a background in research. So I just started devouring all of that. And that's where the book came from.
Cool. Well, do you have any idea when we should be looking forward to being able to buy that book?
Well, no one needs to buy it. I'm not trying to monetize Jesus myself. I'm going to make the book available, but it should be on Amazon this year, definitely about the same time as Nathan's movie comes out. Soon. I'm very, very close. But anybody that needs a copy, just shoot me an email. I'll send you a copy.
Okay, great. Thank you. So back to you, Nathan. I've got a few pictures here that I'm going to put up in a second. And if you could just tell us a little bit about each one. I grabbed these hither and thither off the internet, trying to get some visuals involved. And I'd like you to take the audience into what's been going on in your life for the last 12 years. And has this all been smooth sailing? And have you found anything interesting in the process?
Yeah, it takes me about 7 hours to explain that argument.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's a lot of interesting things, and it starts with really, I got to sit down with what they would call the smartest brain in the U.S. on the nonprofit sector. So a gentleman who oversaw the nonprofit sector for 5 years at the IRS, and so I sat with him. He's a Catholic, and he walks me through the nuance of the legal tax code. And really what's happened from America's inception to present day. So you learn about these milestones in history in the show that have brought us to this moment, to where we can call a $50 million a year mega church a church. We can call an LDS hedge fund, Ensign Peak Advisors. We can call that a church. We can call a radio station and a TV network a church, where we can call a private airplane a house of worship. It's like, how did we get here? And so we work you back through that. And so that interview is the bedrock for the show, because we're not pointing fingers at anyone saying, hey, you're the only one at fault. It's like, we all play in this system, whether it be you're a pastor or an elder or just a lay churchgoer. It's like, we're all byproducts of this legal architecture that's brought us to this moment in history. And so that's what really starts it.
Yeah. And Randy, thank you, Nathan. Randy, was it the other night we were talking? It was either Randy or you, Nathan, but I think it was Randy, when you had mentioned that when you have a church that can run a business with, no taxes, right? That's tax exempt, then it puts that business at an advantage over every other business of the same kind that isn't attached to a church.
It's a brilliant concept, and actually, I got it from talking to Nathan. So okay, so
it's come full circle
with the golf cart and Ferrari example, Nathan.
Yeah, it's a good example. So,
what's the golf cart and Ferrari example? That sounds exciting.
Yeah, so let's take you back to. I'll use one example, and we live in America, a democracy, right? Power to the people. You want a level playing field where the four of us on this call could compete in the market with equality. And so if you and I are all private investors or just private individuals, and we wanted to buy a piece of land down the street, we have to pay property tax, annual property tax on that land. A religious institution does not have to pay property tax on that land. And so they are at the very baseline already in a better position than you, because they can outbid any private investor or anyone looking to purchase land, because they don't pay annual property tax.
So before we go buy that piece of property, we should first get together and organize a church.
Correct. And correct, because the LDS Church is now the second largest private landowner in the United States, and they pay zero property tax on that land. And so it's at its core, it creates an unfair competitive advantage that leans towards religious institutions, and that is in itself anti-democratic. And so if you're a big champion of America, it's like the system itself is antithetical to our principles as a country.
In your docuseries, where first off, I'm presuming that you got a lot of information about how much these pastors in mega churches make. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
How did you get that information, and was it easy?
No. We've had private investigators working with us for 4 years. So we have a couple teams, and a lot of it is through lawsuits. So it's when there's an open lawsuit and people do discovery, you have to, expose your documents. And so we have a lot of documents from lawsuits that literally are stamped confidential.
So not your lawsuits, but you're combing through documents and court files.
We've combed through dating back to the 70s in the show.
That
so
other people have had with the church.
Correct. So we expose documents that have really only ever been seen within a courthouse. And we will, while the show launches simultaneously on our website, any document that we talk about in the show, you can go and look at on our website.
That's awesome. That's a great feature.
Yeah. We want to be held to account too. So,
yeah. So I had no idea that you went and did all that research.
Yeah. We've been working, like when I say we've been doing, when you say, oh, you've been researching for 12 years, we have been in the trenches. Some of our PIs are dumpster divers. They dive in and get shredded bags of information and tape it back together. There's a lot of material in this show that no one's ever seen ever.
Wow.
Yeah. So
all I know is we've got a 3-minute clip, a video clip coming up here presently. And there was nothing in it that showed people like in the library or in the courthouse or in the clerk's office going through documents. It was much more exciting than that. That's why I thought the whole 12 years was like that Miami Vice life you're living.
Yeah. No, it's just once we had the documents, then we doubled down, because then they wouldn't respond to our requests to confirm or deny the documents. But yeah, so the golf cart and Ferrari analogy, this is an interesting one. And we basically say religious exemptions are a Ferrari. If you're a good marketer, if you're a smooth talker, if you're a charismatic individual that can drive an audience, you're sitting in a Ferrari. And the IRS is sitting in a golf cart, and they're both on the starting line. And then when that flag drops and those two things, that Ferrari and golf cart take off, the Ferrari is religious exemptions and the IRS is in a golf cart trying to chase it down. There's been no added support to the IRS. The show actually talks about a court case that happened in the early 2000s that really created, it set a precedent, because a megachurch beat the IRS and said, you can't audit us or come after us. And that case set the precedent for a lot of small cases or smaller churches to say, we can get away with whatever we want outside of murder, basically. And so for about 25 years now, or 20 years, the religious space in America, if you know what you're doing and you have a good lawyer, and this is the big one, if you've got a lawyer involved that knows the space, you can do pretty much whatever you want.
And the church has the best of them.
Yes, correct. Yeah. And we talk about this in the show too. Just like non-denominational pastors and denominational pastors are passing down churches. So they're passing down religious corporations to their children. So they're saying there's one in the show. They have $111 million worth of buildings. That father dies. What does he do? He passes that $111 million in net assets to his child. And then his child sells them all. And you learn all about this. But as these pastors are passing down corporations to their religious corporations to their kids, lawyers are doing the same thing. So there's one lawyer in particular that him and I have a very fun relationship in the show. But his dad was Kenneth Copeland's lawyer in the 70s. and 80s. And so his dad passed all that wisdom down to his son on this is how religious exemptions work. And so you have lawyers passing down generational knowledge on how to beat the IRS, basically.
Well, it's what Jesus would do.
For sure.
So, Randy, tell us about your research. You said you've been working on this thing for 6 years.
Before I do, I want to stick with Nathan for a second, because Nathan, when you told me that, I'm not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree. I have a low IQ, but the way I got your metaphor was that if I had like an insurance company, or if I, let's say, owned a big mall, and I'm up against a religious institution that owns those business entities, I'm paying the property taxes, I'm paying income taxes, I'm taxed, for everything I do. But I'm like going, in the golf cart trying to keep up with my competitor, who's really a church, really a business disguised as religion, with the mall, with the insurance company, with whatever business they want. And they just fly right by me. They can kill me because they've got all these tax exemptions that I don't have as just a regular business owner. Do I have that right?
That's a brilliant, I guess that analogy can double dip, That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. It's the same. It creates unfair business advantages. And then this is the kicker too. You called it, and this is one thing we hammer in the show. A church is a religious corporation, and very few people will call it that, but it is a corporation. And so we have to call a spade and say, that is a business that needs to be ran like a business. And
Nathan, this is true for any church, correct?
Correct. Any church.
Not just the LDS church, because a lot of times some people will call it a corporation if they become disaffected. But this is true for every church. They're all corporations, is what you're saying.
Correct. You have to file with the state and register as a corporation. And so that's what's funny or ironic whenever I have these discussions with people that are very close to the institutions. They go, it is not a business. And I'm like, let me see your corporate documents. It is literally a business, but you don't want to call it a business. And so that's the thing we do in the show is we rip this idea of a church and a community away from the business, because we have to separate the two to bring accountability into the system.
Some people have suggested that about the LDS Church too. I think that the way I visualize it is not golf cart and Ferrari, but great white shark and remora, which I think is the little fish, that's a sucker fish on the big old shark, right? Yeah. And if the shark is the church and the little remora is the business, then things are probably okay. But when the shark becomes the business and the remora is the church, then we got a problem. And somewhere in between those two things, a line gets crossed. And I think that I don't know. I think what most people agree with, tell me in the live chat if I'm wrong, is that maybe laws should be changed a little bit to make it even and fair for people who are doing business who are not associated with the church, at a minimum, for that reason.
Yeah. It's just, we have to level the playing field, and you got to call a spade, and that's what we do in the show. Is and one thing I want to be very clear on is we are not attacking faith, whatever your faith is, whether that be your LDS, Christian, Buddhist, Muslim. We're not here to attack your faith or question theology. We're just the show. The religion business looks at the legal architecture that underpins the whole system.
Can I just take their money?
Can I jump in for 2 seconds here? I just want to show, because I think this is pertinent to what we're talking about right now. I'm going to put it up on the screen. You're aware, Nathan, that the LDS Church, it's approximated, they have somewhere in the range of $293 billion in investment money, as well as property assets and other things. So $293 billion. They expect within like another 12 years, 13, they'll have like $1 trillion or so.
Yeah.
About a month ago, I wanted to start doing some looking into, and I looked up Deseret Industries, which is like Mormonism's Goodwill. It's the LDS Church's version of Goodwill. It's a thrift shop. You drop stuff off. And I wanted to see if I could figure out how much folks were making, how much that entity was making. And it led me down sort of a rabbit hole where I started looking up other companies that the church owns. For instance, here's the Deseret Trust Company, and they've got a 990T. But they don't have to tell you anything. They do have like their basic 990 form, But anything beyond that, they don't have to say. And if you notice, if you go to look up more information, here's what they file. They say book value of all assets at end of year is over $1 million. The organization is an integrated auxiliary of a church, exempted from disclosure of its general financial information to the IRS by section 6033A3 of the Internal Revenue Code. And you may not know this, but the LDS Church owns, I'm going to guess, 100 businesses, farmland, various companies. Every one of these companies can consider itself a subsidiary of the church and not have to tell you anything. And as long as they send their profit back to the church, it would all be tax exempt.
Well, we present this, and so those words right there, and we present this in depth. Those words, integrated auxiliary, those are super crucial to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But then you have two other terms, and we present these three terms in the show, or I don't present them. The brilliant minds that understand this system present it. But there's integrated auxiliaries, there's conventions, and there's associations. So the IRS cannot define what a church is on paper because of separation of church and state, right? So if the IRS cannot define a church, what is a church? That's my favorite question. But then if the IRS can't define what a church is, what the heck is an integrated auxiliary? What the heck is an association? What's a convention? If church is gray, like integrated auxiliaries, conventions, and associations are even darker. And so what you could do is, if you're smart and you want to take advantage of the system, you can call basically anything, like you just said, an integrated auxiliary, an association, or convention, and then you do not have to publicly file anything. So you can build a conglomerate, a literal conglomerate that just dominates markets in the name of religious freedom. And then as soon as someone raises their hand like me and says, hey, foul ball, they scream persecution. So it's literally this system that it's a machine that's so well oiled and refined that it's going to take a figurative grenade being tossed into it to kind of rattle the system, so to speak.
Mormons are really good at screaming persecution. Are other Christians?
Yeah, very, very much so.
Maybe we'll see a little bit about that. By the way, I haven't forgotten about you, Randy Bell. And I wanted to ask you, this last 6 years, you've been working on this book, Monetizing Jesus. Tell us about the last 6 years.
Well, tell you the truth, I got I don't know where the term monetizing Jesus came from, but as soon as it came in my head, I went and got the domains and locked it up with, everything in terms of having the domain, because I just thought it was right on the money, no pun intended, to what I wanted to put together. But then it was like, okay, that's a great title, but what do I do with it? And as I thought about it, the word Mormon is never in the book at all. In fact, the only group that I point out directly is Heaven's Gate, because I was really intimately familiar with Heaven's Gate because it was one of my cases. And I don't think I'll get too many critics, for the fact that, I'm critical of Heaven's Gate. But what's so interesting about Heaven's Gate is it has so many parallels to other religions, quite honestly. If you just look point by point in terms of what they did and what other religions did. So I leave it up to the reader to kind of draw the parallels. I really try and stay away. Well, I stay away from proselytizing in any way. And I'm just kind of laying out worldviews, kind of the process I went through, where I looked at different worldviews. I got into critical thinking, which I already did in my business practice, and cognitive bias, and just put it all together to just kind of, frankly, make sense of what I was going through with the mental somersaults I was going through deconstructing Mormonism and trying to reconstruct a more healthy worldview, which I think I successfully did for me. What I'm saying, what works for me may not work for someone else. That's fine, but it works for me. But without naming names was kind of important to me. So there's no real agenda behind it. So that's kind of how it gelled over the years, how kind of exploded as an idea, and then kind of the process till I landed on having a manuscript ready.
So you said the first pass of the manuscript, Randy?
Yeah, the first pass. What
does that mean? I think you said you had the first pass of the manuscript or something like that.
Oh yeah, no, I've had several passes on the manuscript, but I finally got it to where I think I got it tweaked. At first, I was going to start naming names, and then I thought, nah, it's just kind of, writing a book is kind of a reiterative process. You kind of go back and forth until you kind of land on something that feels right, and I think I'm finally there.
Okay, thank you. Bill's saying first draft is the first pass. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Got it.
But I love Nathan's approach, because while we land on numerous similar conclusions, and which is really thrilling and frankly, in my case, validating, Nathan's taken it from a point of view of, while we're both, whatever you want to call us, we both like Jesus, we're both attacking Christianity in terms of the corrupt forms of Christianity. At least that's the way I see it. Nathan, you can speak for yourself. But we want all religions to clean up their act, quite honestly, because it's embarrassing. Like Nathan, you said, it's embarrassing to call yourself a Christian, because the word Christian can mean so many things that are negative. And I get that completely. And it's because of this kind of garbage that they're getting away with that really attracts the world's predators into the whole scam. I'm not interested in scams. I'm more interested in authentic, faith or non-faith, whatever that looks like. But it's just gotten out of control. It's really gotten very, very bad. And I think it's something everybody can get behind. Atheists, agnostics, Islam, Buddha, Hindu, Mormon, honest Mormons, honest Christians can all get behind these agendas.
Can I add one more thing here before we move forward, just to show folks, because the audience is made up mostly, although we do have 30% of our audience, we learned this recently, 30% of our audience that has never been Mormon ever before. But most of our audience is folks who have left the church or have serious doubts within it. Just to put up a little thing, this is part of the project I've been working on that'll show up on Saturday, but I thought it would be pertinent here because we're all thinking about Mormonism. But this is a problem. These are TV evangelists. You mentioned the guy in the top right.
Kenneth Copeland.
Yeah. He's got $400 million himself. That's his property. That's his house. You've got Creflo Dollar, I think, is another TV evangelist. Joyce Meyer. These folks, they've got palatial palaces. We here in Mormonism, we find out over the last decade or two, we've found out several occasions where our leaders are supposed to be an unpaid ministry. That's what we were originally taught. And by the time they die, they've got 3, 4, 5 houses in the $300,000 to $700,000 range. TV evangelists, I mean, the prophets, seers, and revelators of Mormonism are not living the high life well enough. Look at,
no, they're not.
There's Paul and Jan Crouch down there in the bottom right. I remember them.
Yeah. So I got to talk to Paul's son. He's in the show about TBN. Paul Crouch started TBN, Trinity Broadcast Network, one of the biggest Christian networks in the U.S. And I got to sit down with his son.
Well, is his son still faithful?
No, well, to Christ, he's a Christ follower, but he got kicked out of the business.
Why did he get kicked out?
I don't. It's a very personal story, but there was sexual abuse that happened on church property, and the family leaned to protect the institution instead of bringing justice. And so he walked away.
Whistleblower?
No, it was family. It was family on family, basically. Okay. And so, which is happening at Daystar right now. So Daystar is another network, and a good friend of mine, Julie Roy's, exposed that whole story about a very sad child being abused. And this is a systemic problem in the system. And you got to ask, why is it happening at such scale in the system?
So Paul Crouch's son is no longer affiliated with TBN. What did he tell you? He told me the story and what happened. He told me why he walked away. And then what his father said when he was old and retired and, on his deathbed, he told his son, Matt, his son's Matt, and then Paul Crouch Jr. He told Paul Crouch Jr., who left the church or left TBN, that he goes, at the end of my life,
I didn't know if TBN was running me or if I was running TBN. And that's a huge part of this is these guys create these machines and these systems that are so cash heavy and cash hungry that it runs away on the operators, so to speak. And you can have good intentions. And by the end of it, you're like, oh, I was trying to save souls and now I'm driving Rolls Royces and my dogs have air conditioned dog houses. And, you know, like Paul, like the Crouches had air conditioned dog houses for their dogs. Like that's the
Well,
level.
they lived in Texas. I mean, it was Dallas, right?
Yeah, they had to have it, man. They had to have it. But yeah, just the level of opulence.
Oh, the sets, the set they had on the TV show was just.
Yeah, it's incredible. So you see all of this in the docuseries.
It was gauche. Okay.
And that's my point. This just isn't a Mormon problem. This is people at the top of religious systems have been making tons of money on the backs of those who think they're getting eternal blessings by sending 10, 20, 200, $5,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a systemic problem. And, you know, we got to keep things in perspective. Mormonism is actually a very tiny, small little religion. There's 3 or 4 million active members out of and compare that to Christianity, there's over 2 billion. Yeah. I mean, do the math. It's a tiny religion. What's incredible about Mormonism is we look at I can just speak for myself. As a TBM, a true believing member, you'd see the guys on the TV, the televangelists selling holy water and making all this money. Well, the Mormon church is saying, hold my beer, watch this, and racking up 300 billion in assets. Give me a break. They could buy all these mansions from these televangelists with the money they made between breakfast and dinner off the interest they made. I mean, there's so much money. So in terms of an organization who's really mastered the monetizing effects of religion, we don't have to look any further than our former faith.
Nathan, are you aware that Mormons tithe?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I've done a lot of research on the Mormon Church for the show. The Mormon Church is a big part of the show, and so I wouldn't say I'm intimately aware of the nuance, but I fully understand the tithe. I understand how they leverage the tithe. I understand how if you don't tithe, you don't get your temple recommend. I understand if you don't have your temple recommend, you don't get to heaven. Like I see I know the layers.
Yeah, I was hoping that you were aware of and maybe used this General Conference talk. Remember you referenced it in a recent episode. Was it Lynn Robbins? Was that the guy's name? Basically saying that if you can't afford food for your children, pay your tithing.
Yeah, so this is a fun part of this experiment is, and we consider in the show the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to be Christians. A lot of Christians would deny that, but we are looking at it from a statistics perspective. I don't care about the theological differences. It's like you call yourself a Christian, you're a Christian, right? So Christians have had carte blanche reign, being the majority religion in America since its founding. So no one's really tried to poke holes in it. And so, or no one's really poked holes at a national scale. So of course, technology comes along, every general conference is online. We have AI tools that can scrub thousands of hours of talking head. And so the data we have from leaders speaking at the general conference is just mind bending. And it's a lot of this is in the show when we're referencing the LDS Church. So yeah, how they leverage tithe. My favorite one is, I can't remember his name. Nelson right now. Nelson, right?
President Nelson. Yes, sir.
He goes, initially it takes faith to tithe, but then but then tithing becomes a special privilege. And then at the end he goes, and if you tithe, it's going to keep you out of hell and burning. And it's like, man, that's just a cudgel being slammed over people's head. If I don't tithe, you mean I'm going to burn in hell? Like that's a powerful statement.
I've got to tell you that there's a passage in a book of scripture, the Doctrine and Covenants. You know what that is. There he is. That talks about paying tithing so that you will be saved from the burning. And so it has euphemistically been called fire insurance premiums. That's is wild. Tithing in the Mormon Church because of that passage. And lots of people, probably pretty much everybody out there, knows exactly what I'm talking about. the old fire insurance.
Mm.
You wouldn't want your fire insurance to lapse.
Yeah. Well, and there's also from 1930, don't quote me on the year, early 1900s, the leader of the LDS Church at the time, and this is in the show too, he presents the argument that he wants the church funds to grow large enough one day that you will not have to tithe anymore.
Joseph F. Smith, very good, yes.
And so this is the cool part. Guess what? The LDS Church never needs you to tithe again because they officially can live off just partial interest in perpetuity as a business. So why are they still demanding?
Well, because Joseph F. Smith is what we call a dead prophet. And we don't give a crap about what a dead prophet has to say. We only care about what the living prophet has to say. You've heard that too, haven't you? Now, there's no reason for that at all, except for the idea that, you know, when Noah was around and God told him to build an ark, right? So he's not telling us to build an ark today because we don't need it, but he's got his prophet there just in case there needs to be an ark built or something, you know, something important done. Man. He'll let us know.
Yeah.
That's the theory. Like not calling it the Mormon church. That's the important thing that God has let his prophet, President Nelson, know. We are not Mormons. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Otherwise, it's a victory for Satan, a major victory for Satan. And Jesus is offended. Who's this guy? Oh, this was it, right? Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, this is Valerie V. Corden.
Yep.
Corden of the 70. And he said, if you have to make the choice between paying tithing or buying food for your children, pay your tithing. So the church at $293 billion is so concerned with getting every penny of that tithing versus your kids going hungry. It's insane.
Well, because in this round trips to the conclusion on the LDS Church in the show is that they want you dependent on the system. You give us tithing, hey, we'll give you sustenance for your kids if you're a full tithe payer. And this is a big one, is they just want the authority. They want that control. And so give us your money and we'll provide for you. Is in the second coming. You know, when God comes, he needs this big purse of money sitting here. And hey, if you've paid into it, you're going to get to enjoy some of it. But if you haven't paid into it, you're out. You're kicked out.
Oh, Bill's found something else, apparently. What's this?
There's just lots of them. We don't have to necessarily talk about each of them.
No, please do.
Screen. This is Bishop, or I'm trying to think who gave this talk, but this was on KUTV News. No, that's not it. I'm sorry. I'm saying that wrong. That's a report on the money that the church owns. This was a LDS Ensign magazine, Sacred Transformations, December 2012. If paying tithing means that you can't pay for water or electricity, pay tithing. If paying tithing means that you can't pay your rent, pay tithing. Even if paying tithing means that you don't have enough money to feed your family, pay tithing. The Lord will not abandon you.
Thank you, Bill, because I know exactly what you're doing now, because you got the first one that you showed and you said, that's not the one I was thinking of. It says the same message, but it's not it. So then you said, I got to find this. And you did. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect and well done. All right. So here, I want to show a few pictures here. Let me see here. I've got to remove. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Now, these are some pictures of you, I believe. Nathan, is that correct?
Yeah. That one on the left is probably 12 years ago.
So is that right about the time?
Yeah. This is
this project.
This is actually in Honduras. We had to take dugout canoes up these rivers. I was with a nonprofit. So I've done a lot of work with nonprofits around the world too. So this was a nonprofit that actually would go back into rural mountainous regions in Central America. And there'd be small plot coffee farmers. You might have 3 hectares or 5 hectares or 10 hectares, and you'd grow your green coffee and you'd pick it and dry it. And then these guys called coyotes would come up because you don't make enough money. So you don't own a car. So I would come up in my truck up these remote dirt roads and buy your green coffee for pennies on the dollar. And so you're living in poverty as these coyotes would take your coffee down to port and sell it for, 5 to 10x. And so this was with a charity that brought co-ops to these mountain regions So they'd band all these growers together. They'd help them get certified as organic, and they'd bring the beans down. But this was one of the churches. They had this little tin roof churches. So it's ironic that you put that photo up. And ironically, the people that protected these villages were the drug runners. And so we had to get approval by the gangs, basically, that ran these mountain ranges to go back there. And so I've lived some fascinating life, and that's a really fun photo. But yeah.
Well, it is, and the great story behind it. Now, this one on the right, is that you or is that your dad? Because you look so mature in this other photo.
That's me. That's a headshot that I everybody says it doesn't look like me. So, maybe I should change it up.
Well, you look about 10 years younger than in that picture.
Oh, thank you. That's good. A lot of stress in my life lately.
And now here's some sort of award ceremony.
So this was for a film I did. I've always liked, I have a big heart, you could say. And so my brother-in-law, the pastor actually, who his name's Aaron, who was the only pastor that would listen to me. He's dying of a really rare genetic disease called Huntington's. And so he's in his mid 40s, and he'll pass away in a few years. And so I followed a team of cyclists across the US and the race across America. And we created a documentary called The Longest Journey that profiles the disease because it doesn't get government funding. And so that was at the premiere. And my cousin, the girl, she was my uncle and cousin, and then that's my mom. They're both LDS. He passed away, but his daughter used to be paid by the LDS Church because she was one of the biggest YouTube singers in the Mormon Church. So she'd just do cover songs, and she had tens of millions of followers. And so ironically, she was paid by the Mormon Church to promote the church. But yeah, that was from a premiere of a movie.
And that was The Longest Journey that you told us about.
Yeah.
Now, is that's you in the gray suit?
That's me. Yeah. I clean up nice like once a year.
Well, you certainly do. And here's another couple of pictures. You mentioned going up river.
Yeah. So that's heading to these remote villages on these remote rivers. And then the one on the right is, I don't know where you got, that's just from an Instagram video, maybe.
I have no idea. I was just grabbing anything I could find. Is that snowing?
Yeah. So I think that's from a video we posted maybe a month ago. So that's just down in Salt Lake, me walking around talking to our audience.
Okay, super. The Longest Journey right there, 3,000 miles.
Yeah. So Huntington's disease is, they call it the ugliest disease known to man. It's ALS, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's combined. And so, yeah, we followed a team across the US going 17 miles an hour. It was quite the trip. And so that's become, so I did that when I was probably 26 or 27. That's become the largest educational tool on Huntington's in the world. And so I can't remember how many tens of millions of times that's been screened on Amazon. But yeah, so that's just what I do. I like to raise awareness for good things and, bring solutions to things. And so even 14 years ago, I was doing this same thing that I'm doing right now.
It seems like you put your heart in all your projects.
I do, for sure. I've been told I love way too hard.
Lost Prophets.
Lost Prophets again. That's a surf movie from my early 20s. So this is where I cut my teeth. So I traveled the world for most of my 20s, and I made a lot of money in the commercial world, or I'd make $100,000 in the commercial world, and then I'd just go spend it on a movie I wanted to make. So this is my first film, or my second film when I was like 23. And I felt there was prophets in the surf industry that never got their due because they weren't after attention. They were just out there loving nature and surfing. And so Lost Prophets is that. It's about a bunch of surfers that never got exposed or never got real coverage, but they, in my opinion, are some of the greatest surfers in the world. And so I've always been a big supporter of the underdog. I don't like mainstream things. And I feel like one of my mentors always said, Nathan, as soon as you're with the majority, there's something going wrong. And so I've always liked to look at the minority and try to see, what's going on in those communities. So Lost Prophets, Search for the Collective is about searching for that collective of lost prophets.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So we're bringing it back to the religion business. You told us it comes out in a month,
Mhm.
but sometimes you had an especially lot of fun researching this movie. Now, can you tell us what's going on here in such a way as to prep our audience for the 3-minute video clip we're going to play?
Yeah. So there are 10 major loopholes in the IRS tax code that we present in the show. I need examples of all these loopholes. And so these are our investigations. So we have 9 open investigations. A 10th is just a description. But so that was me after a couple years of frustrating, trying to get answers, emailing, calling. I finally just showed up to a church in Texas.
What church is it?
It's called Fellowship Church. And the pastor's Ed Young. It's down in Grapevine, so by Dallas. He's a mega church pastor. He's got ties to the Baptist church, but he's kind of just a Wild West. I would call him more non-denominational because he has no oversight.
What had you found out about him before you tried to make contact?
So this is what's so cool about this show. I've never picked a target and gone after it. My first prayer, and you learn about this in episode 1, is I said, "Hey God, if you're up there, give me breadcrumbs and I'll just pick up the breadcrumbs along the way because I don't know where to go. I don't know anybody in the IRS. I don't know anybody in government. I don't know anybody in the big church space." And so I'm like, just give me breadcrumbs. I was in Texas visiting my dad, and I just went to his church randomly. And I had a rental car, and I had no idea who he was, but I just go to church every Sunday anywhere I can because I'm trying to do research for the show, and go to service, grab a donut, cup of coffee, walk out, try to start my rental car, and it kind of goes blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what the heck? And this is a really nice church. Cameras everywhere on every parking lot.
This isn't Ed Wood's church, is it?
No. This is Ed. His name's Ed Young Jr.
Ed Young Jr. Is that the bad guy?
I wouldn't call him a bad guy. But yes, he does
That's
not.
where you got arrested. But this is a different church that your dad.
No, this is the same church. So you said, how did
goes
you get
to Ed Young Jr.'s church?
No, my dad didn't go. I just randomly went to this church.
Okay, go ahead.
And so I look under my car, and someone had cut the catalytic converter off my rental car. And I was like, what the heck? And so I call a tow truck, and I go into the church, and I'm like, hey, who can I talk with about the footage from your parking lot? Because I just want to give it to my insurance company. My catalytic converter was being cut out. They gave me an email address. Tow truck takes the car away. And I email them saying, hey, can I get that footage from my insurance? My catalytic converter was cut out. Crickets. I don't hear anything for a month. And I'm like, man, this is lame. So I email them again. And this is where talk about breadcrumbs. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start seeing if these guys ever respond. A year passes. I've sent 3 or 4 emails at this point. They never respond. So on camera, I go, hey, they don't respond to someone in need. Let's see if they respond if I want to give them money. And so I call their give line, and I leave a message, and I'm like, hey, my name is Nathan Apffel. And one thing I do in the show is I do not lie ever. So I'm just I give them my name. I said, I visited your church a bunch. I want to give. I live out of state. Give me a call back. Here's my cell phone number. Within 12 hours, boom, they call me back. So I'm like, they'll take my money, but they don't want to be a help. And so that interaction made me go, okay, I'm going to start looking into this guy. And it didn't take long before I realized this dude's inuring himself and stealing a lot of money. And he's got a lawyer that's playing that same game with him that is now, ready for this, the CFO of the church. So the church's lawyer became the CFO, and he ordained his lawyer. So that's how messed up this infrastructure is of this organization.
Well, we have many, many fine apostles in our church who are lawyers, so it doesn't sound that messed up to me.
I would call it a conflict of interest to be the church's general counsel and their CFO and an ordained minister at this point, but whatever.
It might be. You're right. But we have lots of lawyers who have risen to the heights in Mormonism as well as in the Fellowship Church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a thing. It's a thing. If you're a businessman, a lawyer, a marketing expert, you can rise up the ranks really quick in these religious organizations.
How about a heart surgeon?
Or a heart surgeon.
See, it's everywhere. Look at this, because this is what we as Mormons frequently comment on, which is that the apostles, the ranks of the apostles, we have 12 apostles. We actually have 15 because we're even better than Jesus's church. They only had 12 apostles back then. We got 15. Go Mormons. But the majority of these guys, they're successful business people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's how they get run up the ranks.
Mm-hmm. Well, because they're bringing their expertise in regards to how to scale and insulate the institution. So, you put, I got kicked out of the Ritz-Carlton in Colorado a couple of weeks ago because I wanted to go to a conference. And the head of that conference has a saying, and he goes, his saying is, the business leaders set the pace of the church. Well, if business leaders set the pace of the religious organization, you're only after growth and profits, and whatever that profit is for your institution, but you're not after depth. You're not after community, because that's slow. That's not that, you can't raise money off that. And so, yeah, if you put business leaders at the top, your institution naturally will tilt towards how do we scale? How do we grow? How do we insulate?
Yeah. And I hate to be cynical, but it may be that there's so many businessmen as apostles in the Mormon church is because it's a business.
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
And because they want people in those leadership positions who know how to run a business.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So now, are we ready to play this clip, or is there a little bit more we need to know?
So there's two churches you're going to see.
Yeah.
One is the gentleman.
Play the first clip. So set up the first clip, and then there's a brief space, and we'll stop it there.
Yeah.
And then you can set up the second clip. Is that
sure.
fair?
Yeah.
So what's this first clip?
The first clip is Kenneth Copeland, the gentleman in the post that Bill threw up. He does. So you said he owns that house. He does not own the house. So that is a 19,000 square foot lakefront parsonage on the church property. So Kenneth Copeland's very unique. He had he bought 1,600 acres of land, and he called it the revival capital of the world. So the church bought this, and it became his church. And then over the years, he's a genius in regards to how he works. So he built a 19,000 square foot lakefront parsonage that he does not own. The church owns, but the church funded it. So our question was, hey, no one's ever seen it. If the church funds it, and guess who donates to your church? I do. And I'm a signed up member at your church. I want to see the parsonage. And so this footage is us getting to the parsonage. So I believe we're the first people to ever make it to the parsonage. And then there was one final gate. And you learned about all this in the show. There was one final gate with a key code. And so we ended up doubling back to his private runway that he's named after himself. And that's
he has a jet, or is it just an airplane?
He has multiple private planes.
Okay.
And
that's a lot of watches too. He likes watches.
He likes watches. And so that's where this confrontation happens, is because his parsonage is so far removed on the property, and there's multiple gates to get to it, that no one's been there before. So he didn't even have security. There's not even cameras there because no one's ever gotten there. And so we were sitting there for probably 30 minutes, and I'm like, no one's coming. So let's double back to his tarmac, and security will see us just parked, on the tarmac. So we were just parked on this runway. And sure enough,
who would have guessed he'd be taking off right then?
Well, yeah. It's an inactive runway right now because it needs to be resurfaced. But yeah, so that's where this clip comes into play.
This is like an Area 51 moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I hope Terry Schurz is watching.
Yeah.
So are we ready to do this? And hopefully this will work and the audio will go.
So the first part we watch here is the first clip that we're looking for here. Okay,
correct.
Here we go.
We got somebody looking now.
Yeah, we got it.
Who are you guys?
We're members of the church. I have a question for you, actually. No, my question is, where is Wisdom Heights? Where is the elderly community?
Okay, now. What do you got going?
We're just a couple parishioners, yeah?
Off the property now.
Where's that badge?
Off the
No, I
property.
just want to see where this.
You want to see this? Off the property.
Can you just flash your gun? We want to see your badge.
No, you did, Jack. Crap.
You did.
Get off the property.
Are you
What are
police
you
or?
flashing at us? You literally threatened us with your gun, dude.
I do have an honest question though. Did you just impersonate a police officer? No, I didn't.
What'd you flash at us?
Shut the camera. What'd you flash at us?
So here, I'm gonna get out though.
I already showed it to you.
You were getting close to this. We're
No,
unarmed.
actually, that's probably more dangerous than a weapon, isn't it?
What? A camera? That's true.
What?
I know it is.
We can become paying members. We can pay them, but then there's no recourse if we raise our hand and say, "Hey, we need to see the actual financials." Like, why does a pastor need a 19,000 square foot parsonage that he doesn't even own? As the paying members of this church, we pay for that parsonage. So I think at least someone should be able to look at it.
All right. So as of right now, you guys are gonna have to leave.
What do you think?
There we go. Yeah, that was who's the guy in the pink shirt with the classic line? Hey, I just got an honest question for you though. Did you just impersonate a police officer?
That is a legendary YouTuber named Tommy G. So I needed to bring in reinforcements on that one. And so anytime I know there's going to be either guns or police officers, I bring in a certain camera operator, and Tommy G will do pretty much anything. So
Will he throw himself in front of you if there's a bullet fired?
my camera operator, probably not Tommy G for sure.
Oh well.
But yeah, so that was the standoff. And a lot of people think we've had people say, hey, that scene is staged. And I'm like, no, it's not. That is real reality of what's happening in Texas. And the funny part is I just wanted to dress like Kenneth Copeland does. So that the night before I went to a thrift shop and spent $50 and bought this whole suit with a vest and orange tie, not even expecting my suit to match this dude's suit. And our suits matched perfectly. It's the funniest thing in the world.
Matchy.
Yeah. So God's at work, God's moving.
Did you have a
in the
Cracker
show.
Jack badge as well?
I did not. No. But yeah, so it's interesting. So there's two different security layers there. And we go through the security side because you're going to see it in the next clip too. These churches, I always say they've created these machines, the big mega churches are like a machine and it's just hungry, right? And so whenever they feel persecuted, they go, oh, we're persecuted. We're being persecuted. They kind of up their level of security. And so they have layers of security at these churches. And I've talked to like security that left and they say, I didn't even have training and I would carry a weapon. Like these churches just have these rogue security forces. And so what you saw there was
wear these outlandish cowboy hats.
Yes.
With
Yes.
Kevlar vests underneath their, I don't know.
Well, my favorite is the
guard
next
uniform?
one because there's no uniformity in their security. Every security guard went on Amazon and bought the security vest they liked most. So you have some in camo, some in black, some in blue. There's just no consistency. But so the two guys that I initially bumped into on the tarmac, that was legit a private security firm where those security officers are trained. And I've done research on a lot of security officers called me and talked me through that interaction after they saw it on Instagram. But then the rogue cowboy that just comes flying up, he was actually Kenneth Copeland's private security guard. So like Kenneth Copeland's boy.
Wow.
So that's why that confrontation happened, because it wasn't supposed to happen. But
Looks like he's played by John Ritter.
Yeah, he looks like an older John Ritter for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what that confrontation was, is you had legit legal armed security colliding with a rogue guy who just is egotistical, and he could get into a lot of trouble for doing what he did. He assaulted Tommy G and I. He touched both of us. He pushed Tommy G. Like, you can't lay hands on us unless you're an officer. And so that whole scene is fascinating.
Yeah, flashed his gun, said, "You want to see this, or do you want some of this?" What did he say?
I can't remember what he said. He said
in the beginning up to that point, because it goes by so fast. I didn't see it the first time.
Yeah.
But you're saying, can we see your badge again?
Because if someone flashes a badge, an officer has to show you their badge if you request it. So that's where this is so fascinating, is he thought he was he's like, these kids everybody calls us YouTubers. They're like these idiot, like as I'm being arrested in the next clip, they go, these are just idiot YouTubers. And I'm like, no, I'm a very seasoned professional in the film industry. This is not what you think it is. And so they just have no idea what we're about to present and the argument we're going to present. And so when he flashed his badge, he was not expecting us or Tommy G to have the foresight to be like, let me see that. And so he's never showed it to us the whole time.
I'll just say this, which is the most telling thing, is he did tell the truth to him from his point of view. That camera is the most dangerous thing in this space because you are recording me acting like a fool.
Yeah.
And I, we've all seen the video where Kenneth Copeland is confronted by a female reporter who's trying to ask about the airplanes.
Yeah.
He is so absurdly over the top in his mannerisms and in the way he responds to that. And this is the guy who protects him, sort of behaving in that same sort of way. Anyway, crazy.
Right. So let me ask you this. Are we set now for this, the second clip? Oh, actually, I'd asked you to cue that up. Can you play it again? Because I want everybody to see this. It's when you ask him to show his badge again that he flips his jacket right here. And so you want to see this. And that's when he brandishes the firearm. Or at least
Okay,
What do you got going?
we're just a couple parishioners. Yeah.
Off the property now.
Where's that badge, just by the way?
Off the
No, I just want
property.
to see where it is.
You want to see this? Off the property.
He's over there on that
want to see your badge?
No. You
side. It was over here on his left, I guess.
And then he does it again.
Camera.
Yeah, and you'll see this in the show. Then he does it again because the security guard gets him back to his truck, and then I say something that frustrates him, and he walks back and he opens it again in the show, and that's when we see it for the first time. Is you actually see it, and I'm like, "What are you doing, bro?"
It's crazy.
Yeah.
This guy is a lunatic. Of course, not to try and take away from his lunacy, he's also kind of gotten caught with his pants down.
Yeah. Well, and that's like, again, I don't even blame, well, he's in control of his actions, but he's just a byproduct of this wild system. And he believes his actions are right and justified. And that's the crazy part, is these machines can whip people up into such a frenzy that in this next clip, I'm surrounded by 20 armed security guards at one point in this next clip.
I just want to tell you, the whipping it up into this kind of fury, like you said, I'm just glad that's never happened in Mormonism.
Yeah.
No whipping up into frenzies in Mormonism and bad things happening. So this next one, what church is this next one at? By the way, Kenneth Copeland, is he out in?
He's in Texas.
Kentucky? He's
in Texas. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is also in Texas?
This is in Texas as well.
Is this the Fellowship Church?
This is the Fellowship Church. So this comes from that catalytic converter scene. And then I've been frustrated for a couple of years now because they won't respond. I've called the general counsel, the lawyer. He didn't call me back. And so again, I don't lie to people. So I said, we're in town. We're going to come to church on Sunday if I don't hear back from you. And so instead of him just being transparent, saying, okay, cool. What did they do? They doubled their security and waited for this really aggressive dude with two signs to show up. So that's how we set that stage here.
Okay, great. Do we have that ready, Bill?
What do you think?
Police department's headed here now, so if y'all want to wait for them, that'd be great.
Well, we just have a couple questions. Good, how are you?
Hey, this is private property.
Okay.
If you guys could come this way. Yep.
Well, I just want to talk to Ed.
Oh, no, you know what? Actually, where's our law enforcement?
I donated, so I kind of have a couple questions about it. That doesn't matter? Donors' money doesn't matter? Accountability doesn't matter? Hey, Bob, how you doing? Good to see you, Bob, Cedar.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, right this way.
Right, which way? I want to talk to someone.
You are going to be placed under arrest for criminal trespass because we've already given you, you're going to be placed under arrest for criminal trespass.
Well, don't touch me, please.
Hand your stuff to them.
No, these are my signs.
You're going to be
They're my signs.
detained.
This is my property, sir.
We're on private property.
What?
We're on private.
This is my property. You can't take people's property on
You have
private
been
property.
warned for criminal trespass. You are being detained.
Hey, my elbow is, I have a damaged elbow, so this is not nice. So, I have a question about salaries and housing allowances, and this is how they treat people. They don't respond to emails, they don't respond to calls.
You need to get away from the public.
Because why? Is it making you look bad? Is it making the church look bad? Sir, you don't need to wrench down on that from my wrist.
Here they come, the cavalry.
I asked Todd, and then I asked Scott Weasel if there was a person in the church that I could talk to because no one's ever responded. I just can't believe a lawyer becomes the CFO, gets ordained a lawyer, who's the general counsel. That's called a conflict of interest. And the crazy part is they wave the flag of Jesus and salvation and faith on top of that, and then they get away with literally anything they want. And here you are, I'm the threat, because I asked what his housing allowance is.
Wow, you got a mouth on you, Nathan.
I've been told that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Had you been there before and warned, had a trespass warning?
Yeah, I had a trespass warning. They kicked me off the property, and you learned about this in the show. We don't hide anything. Like, I walked in, just standard. And this is what's so crazy. These people are so terrified of me. I had a photo up in their security office, and my code name was Hot Dog. And so as I get out of my rental car, you're talking about there's 500 cars in this parking lot. In our footage, we see it. There's a parking attendant who grabs his walkie. And so all we can think is these parking attendants knew who they were looking for. And I wish I had their audio feed, because it's probably like hot dogs here, you know? And as I walk in, I just go to so they talk about conventions, associations, and auxiliaries. I go into their bookstore. I want to buy one of his books. I want to buy the pastor's clothing line, so he designs his own clothes. And I want to buy a sweatshirt of his and a hat for my daughter and get a cup of coffee. They kick me out of that. And I said, why are you kicking me out? I give to this church. I want to sit in the service. And I've had multiple security officers call me and reach out through Instagram and say what they did. They totally broke down their protocol. Like, they're so terrified of you. They should have let you just go in and sit, because you are not a threat. Like, your track record is you're not a threat. You'll sit, you'll go to service. You're just trying to document this experience. But they were so terrified of you that they grabbed me from the copy shop. They wouldn't let me buy what I wanted to buy. They walked me out, but they didn't fully give me a criminal trespass warning. So this is where it gets fun. Is I say, if I leave, you won't criminally trespass me. And they say, okay, yeah, just leave. And then they walk me to my car. And so I never got a written warning. The cops never showed up. So that's what I'm like, well, we're going to go back, because we didn't get our answers. And what did we do? We waited politely. We let church service get out. We're not like running into the sanctuary yelling and screaming. It's like, no, I just want to carry a sign that says, hey, who can I talk with? And ironically, as I'm walking up to the church, and you see this in the full show, I'm saying, hey, how was service? Great. Glad you had a great Sunday. And I asked this group, I said, who can I ask about Ed Young's housing allowance? And they go, Ed, you should talk to Ed. And I'm like, you're right. Okay. And I keep walking. So it's so funny. It's fun. Like,
I love the fact that your code name is Hot Dog. We have an apostle named Elder Bednar, whose code name is Pickle. True story.
Yeah. So I'm Hot Dog. I guess I'm called Hot Dog. So,
well, what happened? Were you taken to jail?
Oh, I was taken to jail. I spent the night in jail. And then I had to go 5 court dates. I had 5 court appointments that I had to get
Texas. Did you live in Texas at the time? This is last October. Is this last October?
It was last year. So, and so that case finally closed probably 20 or 30 days ago. So I went back for my final court appearance.
What happened?
Really funny things that you learn in the show.
Dismissed?
Nope, not dismissed.
You took a plea deal.
I took a plea deal. I pled guilty. They gave me 90 days probation. I had to pay a fee, but they'll expunge it off my record. But the prosecutor wanted to add all these addendums to my case. And it was like, if the judge wanted me to go on drug testing, child, like go to therapy to learn how to be a parent. They could have tagged me with an ankle bracelet. Like, they could have put all this stuff on me, and the judge was awesome and he waived it all. But yeah, it was just annoying. They wanted to drag me into court a bunch, and I had to fly back to Texas multiple times to deal with this silly little infraction. So,
hey, Nathan, let me ask you, do you think there was kind of something going on along the lines of the police being in cahoots with the church, kind of like it is in Utah?
Well, that sheriff, I ask in the show, are you paid by the church or are you on the state's dime? Because that shifts a lot from a responsibility perspective, and they never answered that. But the crazier part is my camera operator is this big bald dude, like big bald dude, Steve Hickey, legend on Instagram and Twitter. But he asked them, and this is on camera too, he goes, "Where's your property line? I'll go and stand out of your property line." And the sheriff goes, "We own everything. We own the roads and the sidewalks." And well, no, they can't own the sidewalk, but it's like, that's how arrogant they are in regards to what they're doing. And they said to him, they said, "If you don't get off the property right now, we're going to arrest you." And he puts the camera down and goes, "Okay, arrest me." They wouldn't arrest him. They only wanted me. And it's so fascinating how much truth in a camera just terrifies these institutions, because their institution, again, is built on sand. The whole system is built on sand. And so, or I always say it's a house of cards. You flick one card and the whole thing comes falling down, just because the system's built like that.
What is it that you would like to see happen with religions in general, vis-a-vis the laws of the country?
There has to be reform. Sadly, the government's probably not going to touch it. The gentleman who oversaw the nonprofit sector told me in the show, he goes, "Government's not going to touch it. That's a rat's nest that like nobody in politics wants to get involved in." So he's like, "You guys got to get your house in order." He's like, "You guys need to bring solutions because we can't, because it'll start a civil war, And so that's where we started thinking internally, where we're like, okay, if the government won't touch it, this system's going to just continue to erode on itself. So how do we, as just lay individuals, drive accountability in the system? And that's where we had the concept for the app. And the app the show's cool and it presents a problem, but the app is people aren't ready for what the app is. And it is so massive. We've scraped I believe we are the first group to ever scrape the federal and state databases of the nonprofit sector and aggregate all the data.
Can you tell our audience briefly, by the way, we have to actually get to the point where you tell us why it is that you consider, in some regard, the LDS Church to be the most terrifying church, so we can justify our clickbaity title and show it's not complete clickbait. We want you to do that. But before that, could you answer that other question that I had, if you recall what it was?
What was it? Sorry.
Yeah, I can't remember either. So let's just go ahead. Let's go with this one about the most terrifying, right?
I was going to say,
why is it that the LDS Church, I'm sorry, what, Bill?
Somebody wants to know how many times he's been arrested. How many times have you been arrested, Nathan, in the effort to sort of get these folks to be accountable?
Just once. That was my only arrest. Most of them are smart enough. And again, I don't try to get arrested. So like Kenneth Copeland, those security teams, like those guys were professional. The guys in black that pulled up first, they didn't want to arrest us. Their hands were behind their back the whole time. They were talking cordially. Even the police officers were talking cordially. Like there was one person, and I won't say who, in that whole showdown that walked up to me and pulled me aside. And he goes, "Dude, I fully agree with you." But he's like, "I need you off this property." And so that's why I respect people, is I'm like, I get it. Okay, we're out of here. Like, but Ed Young's was just so wild. And there was so many rogue cowboys, so to speak. All of them wanted to put a hand on me. Like they were, they're like, "We're the protectors of religious freedom." And so that was the only one where, and I knew it too. So you see, I've had multiple people be like, "Dude, you're laughing as they're like arresting you." And I'm like, yeah, because I knew this is the place that I'd get arrested, because they're so ridiculous and over the top.
And it's great TV.
Exactly. But most people are if you have a professional security team, they will not arrest me, because they know it's just bad optics. Yeah. And they know I'm not here to be rude. They know I'm not here to cause a disturbance. So they're like, just talk with him and get him off the property. And we're done with all of this, like these shenanigans for the show now. And so I will say this. I have no idea why no one has ever at one of these organizations just said, "Hey, here's the phone number, give us a call." Because that would fully de-escalate me. And I'm like, "Okay, thanks." And I'd walk off. All they'd have to do is, hey, here's the contact you want to reach out to. But not one in any of these investigations have ever done that. And that's super telling, because it's like, dude, all you have to do is say, "Hey, call me later." Okay, thanks. See ya. It destroys my argument for how ridiculous you are, but not one ever did that. And I find it fascinating.
I think there's a certain element of wanting to show your loyalty to the church, to the pastor, to Jesus by your actions and your aggression towards someone who's seen as an attacker. I'm just saying. So, Nathan, are you still there?
Oh, sorry, I booted out for a second. I'm here.
Just for a second. Okay, so the title of this whole show is LDS Church the Most Terrifying. Okay, we were talking on the phone, and you had said the LDS Church was the most terrifying church. And I said, really? And you said, yeah. Now, in a certain way, can you explain why that is that you think the LDS Church is the most terrifying?
Yeah, so everybody plays by the same rules. So the small Baptist church, the mega church that I got arrested at, the LDS church, they all play by the same legal architecture. The small churches and even the mega churches, they are there to inure. That's a bold statement. The corrupt ones are the ones that people are inuring themselves off of. It's a selfish endeavor, right? They want, like Ed Young Jr. has bulletproof Range Rovers. You know, they have 15 million in real estate. They're out to better their own life. So when they die, it's like
personal enrichment.
Personal enrichment. So these individuals are just selfish. They're, do not take the Lord's name in vain. They're leveraging the Lord's name for their own vanity. Like they are building their little empire. And I like Kenneth Copeland's empire is probably $1 billion. That's still tiny in the grand scheme of things. So they're out building these small little empires to enrich themselves. The LDS Church is different because their model isn't necessarily, yes, people are enriching themselves off of it, but their model is to enrich the institution, the machine. And that's what scares me more is when these machines get so big, like I said, it runs away on the operator or the operators. And at what point does the machine start dominating markets? Like Bill said, the Mormon Church will hit $1 trillion in market cap in the next, I think, 12 or 14 years. They're on trajectory by 2050, I believe, to hit 2 trillion. And it's like you're talking about one of the biggest corporations in America at that point, and they have no accountability and they pay no tax. And by then they'll of course be the number one largest private landowner. They can sway the stock market and move stocks now because they own so much of the market. And you're talking about a Goliath, like a machine, so to speak. And so it's not an individual that's enriching themselves. It is an institution that has no external accountability. And that is terrifying because you hear it from the mouths of the prophets is if you don't pay us tithing when a natural disaster hits or God forbid World War III, yeah, guess what? You don't get to enjoy the benefits of our storehouse. You don't get to enjoy our food reserves. And so all of a sudden it's a monarchy that's even worse than a monarchy because they're weaponizing an institution against their defactors, so to speak. And so that's what terrifies me about it is they can move the economy, they can move politics, they do it in the name of religious freedom in Jesus. And dude, like if you like to read Revelation and nerd out, like talk about a beast, it's like you have a machine that leverages the name of Christ to move population. And that's what terrifies me is it's not an individual, it's an institution. It's a singular entity that lives for hundreds of, that'll live indefinitely unless it's
outlive us all, even President Nelson.
Yeah.
Hey, Nathan, there's a really important stat that came up when we were talking with Renee Steelman, which, by the way, deserves a credit for bringing your name to the Mormon forefront. And so respect to Renee for that. But something you said that really resonated as kind of the apex thought in my mind is that a lot of these churches are businesses masquerading as a religion. But the numbers, the proportions, is like 80% of it. You correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is you're saying something like 80% of the whole institution is a business and 20% religion. Can you kind of expound on that point? Because it's a big one.
Yeah. So we're talking about the LDS Church in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw out a huge tip of my hat to the Widow's Mite guys, because that crew is so rock solid. And they've really helped us build our argument on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for the show. And it's, It's just a financial snapshot, basically. But 2/3 of the entire $300 billion net assets of the LDS Church are for-profit investments. Only 1/3 of this church is church related. So that's your temples, your wards, BYU, anything that the church member can use. So this is a big part about the tithe. You're requiring me to give 10% to this church, and I'm doing it because I want to enjoy what the church offers for me. But instead of building out the church side of things, you're just building out the for-profit investment side. And so now 2/3 of the LDS Church is for-profit, 1/3 is the church. How do you still have a religious exemption is my question. The math just doesn't add up. Like, I get that you want an endowment fund for economic downturns or for future build projects like universities do. Sure, have an endowment fund, have that safe, that conservative safety net. That's awesome. But when that quote unquote conservative safety net becomes the majority of your church, and now you're just leveraging that out in the for-profit sector, that in and of itself, I think, deserves the removal of the tax exempt status, at least on the for-profit investment vehicles, because you're leveraging the religious exemptions to build for-profit investments. That's not what the religious exemptions were ever built for or defined for.
Yeah,
Can I just say really quick, just to jump in, it's the same idea though. You're saying for-profit, but every one of those for-profit businesses get to claim that they are one of those three terms. In this instance, an integrated auxiliary of the church. So they are for-profit businesses looking from the outside, but in terms of in other words, let me say this. Take a KU TV, whatever the media station is that they own, Deseret News, whatever they own, that company makes some profit. How much of that profit goes back into the church coffers in terms of paying the top leadership of the church? And we don't get to know that answer because they might get a stipend from the church. And by the way, stipend is completely the wrong word when it's 180,000 or more. But whatever these private entities make, they make a profit, and that profit has to go somewhere. And if you think these 15 men are running all of these business going, we don't make any money off those things, we only make money off the stipend we get from the church. Well, we can't know. And the chances are it's irrational to think that's the case. Chances are they take some money from all of these entities, but we don't get to know any of it because they're an integrated auxiliary of the church. And folks go, that's crazy, Bill. Well, you go back far enough in time, the church did this a different way. It had all of its leaders serving on the boards of banks and other private businesses and getting paid to be on the board of directors of Zion National Bank or whatever. Once you understand there's lots of games being played behind the scenes, and all of us don't get to see behind the curtain because they get to use statements like this on the screen, and all the for-profit money is really nonprofit too.
Yeah, well, all they have to do is say, hey, all these profits will eventually go back to the church. But you look at that model, as long as you never send it back, you can start bleeding that out into other expenses. And so here's a big one. It might not be direct inerrant, but hey, guess what? What happens if I own a construction company and my uncle's a prophet? And hey, you want me to get that no bid contract? You're going to give me that no bid contract to build this next temple, or you're going to give me the no bid contract to do this. That's technically inerrant. And so there's so many ways that it gets so dirty and so muddy, and that's where it's sad. It's like the Congress in 1913 defined the nonprofit sector, and they had good intentions to do it. And today it's just so abused. And you learn about this in the show, and you learn about how technology has created the opportunity for abuse, and the original definition of the nonprofit sector does not apply today.
Yeah. And a follow-up question to that, Nathan, because this is such great stuff. There's been a lot of pressure on the Mormon church because people are being made more aware of the insane amount of wealth that's been hoarded and hidden illegally through the SEC thing and everything. But now because of this pressure, they're now advertising that they're donating $1 billion a year or something like that. And, number one, we haven't seen audited financials. We don't know where that money's going. We don't know. We don't have anything other than their word for it. And frankly, I don't put a lot of stock in that personally. But the real question is, how do we know it's really $1 billion? Maybe they're attaching $50 an hour to the voluntary efforts of people. Mm-hmm. In other words, they commit this, I don't know if the right word is fraud, but this kind of stuff, and we really don't know what's behind the numbers. Do you have something to kind of say about their advertising doing goodwill and not really having to back it up?
Well, I'll say you got to have faith, Randy. Because here's what people don't realize, and this is something we really try to present in the show. The LDS Church, we have audited financials, right? The Ed Young Jr.'s church, we have audited financials. Every decent sized church will have a third-party auditor come in and say, hey, here is our audited financials. Well, what does the auditor get? What financials do the auditor get? And this is what's really what you have to realize is a secular nonprofit files in Form 990 with the IRS. This is just an informational sheet that shows where the money goes, who got paid what, and it's for the donor to say, hey, this is a legally binding document that if I catch them in a lie, that's on them, right? And I can hold them to account on this document. But since religious institutions do not file that document, there's no legal document that they can be held to account for. So if I don't have the best intentions, guess what? I can download my church's general ledger and I can edit that thing all I want and then hand it over to the auditors. And the auditors have to take my general ledger as fact. And so even the audits, you can't trust the audits because there's no legal document that holds the financials that were given to the auditor to account, if that makes sense. So when I say, Randy, you just got to have faith, man. You just got to have faith because there is no outside influence looking in saying, hey, are these financials accurate? And so the whole system is based, again, the house is built on sand, and you can put audit reports all day long in front of me from a church, but I will not trust that audit report.
Amen. Yeah.
Wow. Well, we are at 1:47, an hour and 47 minutes. It's been really exciting. We have the phone lines open I'll come around again here a second. I think it's 667. Does it start with 667, Bill?
662-667-6667.
That's it.
Or 662 Mormons.
Yes, I know that one. 662-667-6667.
And I'll also put the link in the live chat. If you want to just come into the studio, that will make the conversation easier. You can leave your camera turned off if you want to stay anonymous, but feel free to come in that way as well. And we'll take 3 of you to have a conversation if you want to do that.
Who would think that when you spell out Mormons on your rotary dial, you get 3 6s in a row?
Yeah, who would have thunk it? Huh? All right, are you ready for phone calls, RFM?
I am.
Okay.
If everybody else is.
And there are 2 folks on the line. So give me just a second here. I did want to just show just so folks can sort of get a real quick glimpse, and then we'll go right to the phone calls. This was just off of Wikipedia, and it was 2 different websites. And this, by the way, is not a complete list. I've seen a complete list, or at least a sort of complete list before, of all the things the LDS Church owns, and it goes on and on and on and on. But ag reserves, beneficial, financial group, it goes on, farmland reserve, Hawaii reserve, Deseret News, Bonneville International Corporation, owns radio stations, Deseret Book, Deseret News, Temple Square Hospitality, Deseret Digital Media, and tons of other companies. I mean, every one of these companies, you can bet your rear end that they make money, that they're not in the red. And that goes, I think, for DI as well. And so where does the profit for every one of those companies go? Who the hell knows? And we'll never, and honestly, unless they change the laws, which will be difficult, we may never know. So anyway, all right, phone calls. Here's somebody who wants to talk about the AG reserves, the ag reserves of the church. So caller, what's the name?
Hey there. Is it all right if I stay anonymous for this one?
You can,
Sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. So I just was hoping to talk a little bit more about the ag reserves, and I apologize, I missed the first part of the show, but I was wondering how much was looked into the international holdings of ag reserves and all the things that they're doing, if you were able to explore that at all.
Who wants to take that?
Well, I
Hopefully
think-
you.
Yeah, I think
Yeah. The Widows Might team only looks at U.S. holdings because there's no way to track international holdings. So you have no idea how much any church, whether that be the Roman Catholic Church, the LDS Church, owns overseas. That's something that will never that you'll never be able to touch unless laws change, to Bill's point, and they have to start disclosing this stuff.
Okay.
So, anonymous
Well,
person, what do you know about ag reserve, and why are you calling about it?
Well, I actually talked to an internal auditor in the church, and they have told me that Ag Reserves actually owns the largest olive oil farm production in all of South America. And I think they said the smallest amount of olive oil that they even will sell to people is around 40,000 tons. They're not selling small amounts. And during the harvest season, they have trucks coming in with olives for 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. They close on the Sabbath, of course. But just for weeks and weeks, they're just bringing in all these olives and processing them. It's in Chile, actually. And they also own the largest almond production farm, according to this person as well. So just to give you some insight, if you have like some blend of olive oil in your kitchen that has some from South America, it's probably most likely from the LDS Church.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I guess that's the only way we'll find out about this kind of stuff is anecdotally.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, until yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Anonymous. Thank you for the call.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Take it easy.
Good night.
The second call dropped off, but we do have Kendall down here. So, Kendall, how are you?
Hey, doing great. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Welcome to Mormonism Live. What's your question?
Yeah, I really have been thinking about Nathan's comment about like other churches. It's mostly for individual betterment and hoarding and getting the wealth and benefits of money. But the LDS Church, it's for the institution. It's feeding a machine. And you were saying like, let's geek out on, revelations and prophecies. Like give us some scenarios. What could they do specifically? They sell it to us as some rainy day fund. What are some other possibilities? Like what could they be planning?
Well, the LDS Church, from my understanding in our research, only has given two reasons for such a massive fund. One, for the second coming. And that doesn't hold water for me because wouldn't your creator God not need your money? And then two, as a rainy day reserve. Well, I understand that. Like, how much reserve do you need? Do you need a year? Do you need 5 years? Do you need, if you want to take the biblical lane, do you need 7? And so, sure, even 7, you could use the Bible as a tool to say we need 7.
Right. And there you'd be about $42 billion.
Yeah. But now you are, the Widows Might report calls it escape velocity. The institution, this machine is so big that like when a rocket blasts off, you need all that fuel and that expenditure to get out of gravitational pull. And once you're out of it, you have escape velocity and you just go and you don't need to burn. The Mormon Church has eclipsed escape velocity and it can just go. And so that means that their second excuse for a rainy day fund doesn't hold water either. So what are you guys doing?
Yeah, that's my question.
Some people think that they're not doing anything. They don't know what they're doing, and that the machine has, in a very real sense, taken over and is on autopilot, just making money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I would see, I've actually heard, and I haven't, this is just anecdotal because I haven't looked into the bylaws. I don't even know if you can get a copy of the bylaws of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But I've heard in the bylaws, tithing can only be used for expansion of the church. And so technically Ensign Peak is only funded by tithe money. So that's why they can't dip into that fund. And this is anecdotal, but this is what I've heard, because that fund is built off of tithing. So they can only build temples with it. They can only build wards with it. They can only expand the physical church. That's
well,
what
the thing is that all of the all the expenses
reach that point and they're not having some plan with it. Like, why not use it? It just, even if they're nefarious, they should use it 10, 20 times more than they should. Everyone, they themselves would benefit from that.
They could give, if there's 4 million active members, they could give every active member $73,000 each. If they took that 293 billion and divided it up, it's sort of insane.
Wow.
If they wanted to up worldwide membership, do a tenth of that. That'll get headlines. That'll get positive press. I mean, someone be put in there that's creative. Like, I'm thinking on behalf of the church here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Kendall, great question, but I would add on to your question, because I've noticed, and maybe you have too, Kendall, is that when all this information comes out about how huge the wealth is of the church, there's kind of this proxy feeling by a lot of the membership within the church that somehow they feel empowered. They're not ashamed of it. It's like they're proud of the fact that the church is hoarding vast amounts of wealth. Am I the only one that's noticed that?
No, they absolutely are, because they have to be. They have to be in order to not grapple with how wrong this is in a church that's supposed to be headed by Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To me, it's mental gymnastics. Like, oh, this is bad. Actually, we're going to spin it, use our mental gymnastics, make it good. The calls I see online is hashtag make it a trillion.
Yeah. We get that every, that's a great point. Every Mormon post we do, hashtag make it a trillion.
But the thing is, this gold fever, right? This love of money talked about in the New Testament, it's a real thing. It's
I
a
just
real
can't fathom
thing. And
having
the church
money
has
and
it
not
as
wanting to use it. I just don't get that.
because when you use it, it won't be as big. And the joy of it is the amount and increasing the amount. And the largeness of it is the joy of it. And that's the problem. That's the love of money. That's the root of all evil, according to the New Testament.
Wow. Yeah, you make a good point too, and we've said it before on the show, but Jesus, the guy who during his mortal life turned water into wine, walked on water, replaced ears that got cut off. No one else has done that, as far as I know, in the age of verifiable history. And somehow when he comes back, he's going to need 293 American dollars to do something. It's sort of crazy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well, the streets of heaven aren't going to pave themselves,
Yeah, it's gonna cost, and gold's going up. I mean, it's over $3,000 an ounce at present, so it's gonna cost a pretty penny. So Rodney is our last person for the night. Rodney, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just great. Can you hear me all right?
Hear you great.
Awesome. My webcam actually wouldn't come on, or I'd show my face, but you can see my face. Anyways,
is that a picture of you?
It is me, yes.
In the sunglasses?
Those are my normal glasses, but yes.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
outside,
but they just
they transition, I think is called the lenses. Yep.
Yes,
that's definitely me. Yeah, I think this is a big tell for the church that theologically speaking, it's not true. And that they lack faith, because if they had faith, they would give it essentially all away. I don't remember the names of all the people on your board here this evening, but one of the gentlemen said it's okay to have a rainy day fund for operational costs. I agree with that. For any organization, I think that's smart.
All of us would agree.
But, yeah, but beyond that, come on, don't you have faith? Don't you actually believe that you are the church of God on the earth? When you have $300 billion sitting around and you're not using it, and they're not, that tells me you don't believe. Because if you really believed it, most of that would be given away.
Hell, if you really believed it,
Right.
you'd send somebody to Children's Primary Hospital in Salt Lake City and you'd heal a few kids that are terminal with cancer. But that's just not the business this church is in.
There's an amazing woman in Africa that, because we don't just profile the bad players, we profile good players in the show. And she's called Mother Teresa of Africa. Her name's Sister Rosemary. And she has done so much in Uganda, from back at the Lord's Resistance Army with Kony to she feeds thousands of orphans in South Sudan. She's just an amazing woman. And she uses this concept to describe faith. She goes, Nathan, whenever I see a need, and it's got to be a very specific need, I know I need to fill it, I will step out into the unknown. And even if I don't have the resources, I know when I step out into the unknown, God's going to catch me, because the unknown is God. He's been there before me. And this woman leads so much by faith, because she sees a problem. She's like, I'm going to solve it. She has no, safety net. And she's just changing northern Uganda and Gulu with her faith. And so to your point, if you actually had faith, you would give most of it away, and you'd give it away freely, and that's what you wouldn't say, hey, we're going to give it to this other organization that the church owns. We're not going to give it to this auxiliary that we own. Hey, these guys are doing good work. These gals are doing good work. Here you go. And, you freely give. And very valid point.
One of the things that really actually made me mad with Russell Nelson, and I don't know if you've covered it in your show, I didn't watch the whole show this evening, was he was in Africa, and his address in Africa about the poverty of the saints in Africa, and his solution was to give money to the church. He is, I think Elon Musk is a little bit more wealthy than Russell Nelson, because President Nelson is, corporate soul.
Right.
So he's close to the wealthiest man in the world. To have I'm not into all the white privilege stuff, but I'll just say it, to have an old white American dude stand there in front of, poverty-stricken Africa and say, the solution to your poverty is to send money to Salt Lake City, Utah, was so enraging to me, and so absurd. The solution to their poverty, Russell Nelson, is to use your $300 billion to help your people. Mm-hmm. Do you know how easily you could change their world? Like, you don't have to give $73,000 to a person in Africa. Give them $100. That's more than their annual income.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just made me so mad, and it was just another indication of just he doesn't actually have faith.
Mm-hmm.
That's not faith. It's just a business, and having been LDS for 34 years, it just makes me so sad, because there's great, tremendous potential. Imagine what you could do with that money.
Well, I think a lot of times you see what a person's really made of when they get enough power to affect the lives of other people.
Mm-hmm. Well, can I, Rodney, to your point, imagine what they could do. And this is the show ends on a high note. And here's the high note. The American Christian Church, just the American Christian Church, could solve the top 30 global social issues, and it would affect no one's bottom line. I'm going to say that again. The American Christian Church, the LDS Church is part of this, could solve the top 30 global social issues, and it would affect no one's bottom line. All they would have to do is bring accountability into the system, because there's so much theft that goes on. So we as a community could radically transform the world if we were just better stewards of the resources we asked from our churchgoers.
Yeah.
And
think about it. The Mormon Church could bring every village around the world to these poverty-stricken villages clean drinking water in a New York second, if they had the desire to actually follow what Jesus actually said. That's how wrong this whole thing. And that's just the Mormon Church, not the entire Christian church, to your point, Nathan.
Well, they could the Mormon Church alone, off the interest they make on their money, could solve the top 15 global social issues.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And we
Isn't there a story in
present
the
those
making?
issues in the show. So
All right. Well, I tell you what, I think that's all the callers. I think that's everything we've got. We're sure looking forward to your show dropping in a month's time. We'll look for that. And sounds exciting. Randy, we're going to be looking for your book, Monetizing Jesus. By the way, Nathan, your show, The Religion Business. Thank you so much for making the time to drop by tonight and share these wonderful stories with our audience. These are great projects, and I think you're both to be commended for them. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Bill, for all the behind-the-scenes support. You've done great things tonight. And please join us. Let's see, Friday, 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time. Bill and I will be here looking a little more dapper for Mormonism After Dark, where we synopsize the week and talk about things of interest to us and hopefully to you too. It's a viewer-led show where you get to call in and raise the issues that you want to raise. And other than that, please join us next week. Oh, hang on. Saturday, Bill, 1 o'clock p.m. or is that my time?
2 p.m. Mountain, 1 o'clock your time in Central, right? So
I'm Pacific.
Pacific, and 2 p.m. Mountain Time. It'll be here on the Mormon Discussion YouTube channel. Please come join the watch party. It'll be a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks again, Randy. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week on Mormonism.
It's going to be awesome.
It will be on Mormonism Live. Good night, everybody.
Thank you guys so much for the time.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.